Hello everyone, welcome to Keen Ear. And first and foremost, I just want to mention John Bellamy, who pointed me in a direction recently to a group called Funky Junction, and this also stems from the Thin Lizzy video that I made kind of recently. Going through my Thin Lizzy collection, and yeah, from what I understand, Thin Lizzy in the early '70s were approached to help produce a tribute album to Deep Purple. And they somewhat reluctantly agreed to take part in this project, partly because they signed a contract in the end, I guess, because they wanted the cash, they were rich with the cash at the time. And you can kind of tell how reluctant they were to take part in this album because Phil Lynott, you'd expect to be lead vocalist at least, with him being lead vocalist and so prominent in Thin Lizzy. He's just playing bass guitar, so yeah, it kind of tells you everything you really need to know about that project. But yeah, it was definitely it's definitely an interesting page on Thin Lizzy's sort of folklore, really, and it's a page that I was completely unaware of. So thanks, John, for highlighting that. It was a real sort of real education, sort of checking that out. Like I said, I saw a documentary, kind of recently. Uh, on Thin Lizzy. I showed the DVD actually in that collection video, and they didn't even mention the existence of this Funky Junction. So yeah, it was something I was completely in the dark about. So once again, thanks again for that sort of tip. That sort of unusual sort of diversion in the Thin Lizzy sort of discography, I suppose. So uh, the Kinks are a group that I particularly like quite a lot. They're a group that's a bit of a favourite of mine. I don't have a huge amount of their material, but they're a group that I really do like, and I am planning on getting hold of more. It's sort of similar sort of deal, this video, to the Thin Lizzy video, really, in that it's a work in progress. This collection at this point in time. I'm on the lookout for more. And the Kinks really are I always think of them like a bridge between the Beatles and the Stones. On the one hand, the songwriting of the Kinks is sort of there's similarities, at least as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can hear anyway. There's similarities between Lennon and McCartney. There is definitely some Lennon and McCartney in the Kinks writing, but I think on the other hand as well, the Kinks originated in London, so they got this London connection, and the music is very sort of 1960s London. You really do get this strong feel. I think more than any other music in existence, really, I get this strong London 1960s feel from the Kinks, more so than anything else, really. So that kind of gives you that connection with the Stones, but they've also got this slightly harder edge to a certain extent, at least by 1960s harder edge, which probably wouldn't be hard edge by today's standards, but back then I guess it was, which of course the Stones had this harder edge as well, which the Beatles kind of didn't. So that's another connection that they have. But in between that, there's sort of their own thing as well. So they got these connections to the Beatles and the Stones, but they're their own sort of their own sort of entity, really. And they never had the success, the sort of grotesque success, particularly that the Beatles had. So they got the underdog sense as well. It makes you want to, at least me, anyway, it makes me want to root for them that little bit more. So yeah, they're definitely like a group that I definitely admire and definitely like quite a lot. And my collection would probably be a lot more extensive if it wasn't for one big main reason, and that was the popularity. The popularity that they had just wasn't there, and as a result, their albums just didn't sell anywhere near as many as particularly the Beatles. Vast amounts. And because of the Beatles and because of the Stones, I guess there was less room for groups like the Kinks to kind of have any sort of elbow room and to kind of compete. Because so much of the market was being gobbled up by them. So there's that as well to think about. And another thing as well, one of the things that I kind of found out a few years ago when it comes to Kinks records is they were generally perceived amongst a lot of people as a singles group, as a 45 group, rather than an album group, even by their own label. And in the 60s in the UK, they're on the Pi label. And these are a couple of 60s UK 45s, and you've got two of the big ones here. You've got You Really Got Me, which is the breakout Kinks track, it's the track that made the Kinks. And you got Tired of Waiting for You as well, which is another big one from the early period. And yeah, these were huge sellers. The 45s are particularly easy to get your hands on compared to the albums. You can get these very easily and very cheaply. The albums, on the other hand, are a very different story. And in this time, the Pie label, they had a budget label called Marble Arch, and they decided what would be a good idea if they get these 45s and other tracks and that kind of thing, all the popular tracks, but make an album out of it, make a compilation, put it out, and we'll sell as many LPs as we're selling these 45s. That was the idea, make a bit of cash. Unfortunately, though, what they ended up doing by doing that was undercutting the studio albums that the Kinks were putting out, because the young kids that were coming in to get these albums, who made up the vast majority of the fan base of the Kinks, the same way with the Stones and the Beatles and all those other groups. They'd go in and they'd see a new Kinks album, and then alongside it would be a cheapo Marble Arch record, and they go for the cheapo Marble Arch record because they haven't got much cash. Young people then and now generally don't have as much money as older people, of course. So yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot, effectively undercut themselves. So that was another reason why Kinks albums, along with the main reason being they're not as popular as the Beatles and the Stones, so they're pretty hard to get hold of. So the reissue route is the main way to go. Thing is, though, the reissues weren't as common as Beatles and Stones albums, because they weren't as popular. So even that route's not necessarily the best way to go. But thankfully, thanks to the vinyl revival, comes to the rescue in 2014 was the 50th anniversary of the Kinks, and we got some vinyl reissues. I think for the first time since the 80s, something like that. I think that was the case. It was the 80s was the last time these albums came out on vinyl. Yeah, they put out all the 60s records. 2014 was the launch of this, and this is one of them. This is Kinda Kinks, and it says here at the bottom, remastered audio, limited edition, red coloured vinyl. And I believe the story behind these is they came out red vinyl, and then after a while they just put them out in standard black, sort of lighter weight vinyl. It was a European release first and foremost, and I believe sometime or another they decided to put them out in America, have an American release. And the American ones are actually all analog. They use the original analog master tapes. I believe though all of them, regardless of them being the US version or the European version, they're all mono. So when you think about it, you can get a mono modern day press of Kinks albums, either digital or analog, but you can't get that with the Beatles, which is the big boys, of course. So I think that's somewhat kind of a bit of a paradox, really. You can get the Kinks mono digital, mono analog, but not digital. But anyway, you kind of see what I mean. So you got a bit of choice with the Kinks, but you don't get them in stereo. That's the only downside of that idea. But anyway, this is the next record I'm going to be showing. It's the King Controversy. This is a pretty decent album. The kind of Kinks is regarded largely as one of the weaker sort of 60s albums. Still pretty good though. I'm still glad I picked her up. Same sort of deal with this. I think this is more highly regarded, and I really do like the cover of this. And this is again a modern day reissue, a little bit later though, because you can tell it's not one of the first few that got produced, because it's black vinyl rather than red vinyl. But yeah, nice. I got this on eBay and I paid next to nothing for it. It was really dirt cheap. I think I may have paid nearly as much for the postage as I did for the record, and I was happy to get my hands on that. And I only do have a bit of a soft spot for this album. Actually, it's got some really nice stuff on it. I think it's something that's definitely well worth checking out. If you want to get into the Kinks, this is one that I probably would maybe think about picking up or listening to first. It's a bit of a hot tip album to check out. If you want to get into the Kinks, check out King Controversy. And it's got kind of a funny, if you get it on vinyl or whatever, you can read the back. It's got kind of a funny sort of little bit of nonsense really on the back. So anyway, move on now to this. This is the big one, I suppose, the Village Green. You know, when this came out, you know, it didn't do well at all. It was a big flop. And now, if you buy it, you know, if you'd have bought it like a box of them or whatever, you know, a crate of copies of this, you could probably retire in the Bahamas because they're so damn collectible. But this is obviously a modern day reissue. I've kept the shrink on it, although I probably should take it off because I'd like to see, you know, the gatefold. There was a gatefold design. I just kept it on. I kept it on for a few years now, so I'll probably keep it on forever. But yeah, it's a standout album from the Kinks. You know, it's one of the standout albums from the later '60s. A lot of people, I've heard some people say they prefer this over Sergeant Pepper, and that wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that. But there's some good stuff on here, and it is regarded as one of the Kinks' best, if not the best album the Kinks put out. So yeah, that comes highly recommended as well. It's the same black vinyl with this one, so I won't bother showing it. So the final one I'm going to be showing is a bit of a highlight of my collection. It's a pretty big rarity. You know, I was saying before that the Kinks albums are pretty hard to find, you know, original copies. Well, this is no 2014 reissue. This is the genuine article. This is they said 2065 or whatever. No, this is a 1966? Yeah, 1966 original UK press. Still got the price sticker on as well, weirdly enough. 15 shillings and sixpence, I believe. No idea what that is. You know, that's way before my time, all that sort of pre-decimalisation nonsense sort of thing. But yeah, it's a fairly nice copy I found on eBay. Wasn't cheap, but it's a pretty nice copy on the Pie label. Mono press. And yeah, nice copy, great album as well. You know, Face to Face is regarded as one of the Kinks' best albums. And I kind of couldn't believe my eyes when I kind of ordered it because it was just regarded as, you know, it was just listed as being a fairly average condition. And when it arrived, I was thinking, actually, this is pretty nice shape. You know, it's not mint or anything, but, you know, for an album from 1966, it's just like, you know, unlaminated and that kind of thing. It looks, you know, on the back anyway, it looks pretty good shape, and that's a great cover as well. Really is a standout cover as far as I'm concerned. It's sort of up there amongst the best, really, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that's it for my Kinks collection. Like I said, I don't have a huge amount of them. I am on the lookout for more. Mostly the '60s stuff. You know, I'd like to have a whole '60s collection, and then think about maybe, you know, the early '70s stuff as well is pretty highly regarded, but unfortunately, annoyingly as well, just as difficult to kind of get your hands on. And then you kind of went through this sort of weird period where there was a lot of sort of concept albums and that the sort of you know, the popularity just went down and down really. But yeah, getting that really sort of gold period of the Kinks, you know, the '60s and early '70s is something I'd like to kind of get my hands on in time, you know. Slowly but surely I'll get there. I wish I could get them originals like this, but I don't think that's necessarily ever going to happen. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll be making another video again soon. I've got a few ideas floating around the old noggin, and yeah, I'd like to be making a video again soon. So I'll see you soon. Bye bye.